Alright, so I'm going to do a follow-up video here on the Orca FPV controller. I showed this here in the Orca Dream X video. I'll link that in the video description in case you missed that. It's their new 5-inch drone analog, and I think they also have one available that you can put your other VTX components in there, like digital, like FPV, DJI FPV, or Walk Snail, etc. That will be linked down in the video description. So I'm not going to talk about the quad. It is doing well. Have flew it a few more times, and I'm going to do another video on this later, where I will. I think I'm going to convert this over to the first gen DJI. Probably put some sort of a Caddx. I think the new Nebula Pro camera and a Vista in the back, and I'll show you how to convert the analog version over to that, and also what the if you get the digital ready version, what that installation is like. So that, if you're wondering about that and why I didn't cover in that video, in the review video, is I'm going to have a separate video on that. So I'm going to get to that eventually. So that'll be later. I do also want to mention that I forgot to talk about the Orca Care program. So one of the things that, people are wondering why this quad's so expensive is they do offer 3, I guess, no questions asked replacement parts for the frame, and including any of the hardware like the standoffs and screws, etc., and all the carbon parts. So if you break an arm, top plate, break a standoff, something like that, strip some screws out, you get 3 basically no questions asked replacements. So basically just contact their customer support and they'll just send you the parts out. It'll be sent out the slowest shipping method for free, but if you want it sent faster, if you need it, if it's urgent, then of course they will offer you options to pay extra for faster shipping. But if you take advantage of the Care program for up to 3 repairs, they will send you parts for free. That's included in the price of the quad. So that's also another reason why it's a little bit more expensive. So that's why I wanted to talk about that, because I didn't talk about that in that video. And I do want to talk a little bit more about this. I did mention this controller in that video. So again, go back and, if you want to hear my thoughts on that, go ahead and watch that video. Now, in terms of like how I feel about the controller, my thoughts on that haven't changed. Now, I have been made aware of a program that Orca is running. I think it's new. It's part of their STEM or education program. It's called Orca ACE. And what they're doing with that program is they're trying to get students or younger folks into FPV through this controller in basically 3 steps. And so the first step is you get the controller, and of course with the controller you can use their simulator. It's called Skydive, and Skydive works on their basically mobile apps like iPhone and Android, and they have also a Steam version that works on Mac, Windows, and Linux. So basically all your bases should be covered there in terms of operating systems to get this controller working as a first timer. So if you're a first timer, don't have anything, you just want to get into FPV, Orca's ecosystem starts you off with this controller. You get this, get the simulator, get flying in the simulator, and then that's the first step. So the second step then is you'll get basically they offer a Whoop. It's a newbie drone, I think Acroby 65. But it's a special version that has the Ghost receiver built into it, so you're going to need that, of course, and of course you're going to need the Uberlight module that goes with this controller that goes in the back here. So you start off with the controller. That's step 1. Step 2 is you get the Uberlight module, which is the Ghost protocol, and of course it's wireless with the antenna here, and then that controls the Acroby 65. Basically it's a tiny Whoop. Now, I don't have that. The Orca did offer me to send that to me. If you want to see a review on how this controller works with that particular Whoop, let me know, and I could review it and make a video about it. But my opinion is it's going to fly like an Acroby 65. Obviously, just a different protocol. It's probably not going to make a huge difference. But if you really want to know, by all means, let me know down in the comments, and we can get that video for you. But that would be what in this ACE program, that would be step 2. You get the module so that you can control the Whoop, and then you get the Whoop, and then step 2 is obviously taking your simulator experience the next step from, basically to the next step, and it's doing line of sight flying. So it's probably gonna be in angle mode, using the controller, flying the Whoop line of sight. And then the third step is to obviously go the final step and do FPV with their FPV-1 pilot goggles, which I showed you in the DreamX video. I will have another video on the goggles in my experience with those in comparison to my Skyzone, basically I think they're called the O4X Pro goggles. So basically it's like the top of the line Orca goggles versus the top of the line Skyzone goggles. And I'm going to do a whole rundown on like comparison of the screens and my subjective opinion on how they feel, which ones work better for me, etc. And so what I've been doing is I've actually been flying at least all the analog stuff, all the analog videos you've been seeing lately, pretty much exclusively with the Orca goggles. So if you want to see and hear all my thoughts on those goggles and my very specific experience with those, I will have another video on that one later. That one I think is going to be the next one in this sort of series from Orca. So that'll be a comparison of those, and so you're going to get a really good, I think that'll be a pretty good video because I've been using the Orca goggles pretty much exclusively without going back to the Skyzones. I already know how the Skyzones feel, and I wanted to basically get a lot of flights under my belt with the Orca goggles to get a sort of a very refined feel for how those would work for me, and then I can sort of convey how they might work for you and which ones might be better and for what kind of pilots. So that's going to be later on. Anyway, so back to the controller. As I said, there's the three steps, right? So they start off with this, and then you get to step 2, which you get the module, and then the Whoop, and then step 3 would be get the goggles. Now that there was some people in the DreamX video saying that, hey, while the Orca ecosystem's nice and everything, promoting the 5-inch quad as the first step is probably not a good idea. It's probably dangerous. Can't disagree with that necessarily. Obviously, if you got a lot of simulator experience, you're probably going to be okay as long as you're, don't do anything dumb. But obviously, if you are more, safety conscious and you want to try something that's going to be a little bit less dangerous than the 5-inch here, then of course that 65 millimeter Tiny Whoop, the Acrobeast 65, definitely will qualify. I really doubt you're going to hurt anybody with that one. So if you want to go that route, start off with this, start off with the Whoop, and to get the goggles, FPV to your heart's content, master that, and then you can move up to the 5-inch at that point once you've basically become a seasoned pilot at that point. So to address those concerns, that's kind of what Orca is recommending, and I wasn't aware of that at the time. I think it's a new program that they didn't tell me about before, or maybe I just overlooked that. But for those of you that are concerned about that, you can go that route with their system. Now, as I mentioned in the previous DreamX video, there's the ability to, obviously mate this controller up with their simulator. That's the main purpose. But then as you advance on and into their ecosystem, they do have a mobile app, and I also showed that in that video, where you can control things like the VTX and the receiver. Those are all the benefits of using this controller and their ecosystem. However, if you don't like this controller particularly because it's, too small, or you're a pincher and not a thumber, stuff like that. Now again, I think, I'm talking to people here that are not already flying. So I already know there's a lot of you guys out there that have been flying for a while. Obviously going back to this would make no sense because you already have something probably a lot better than this. So, for those of you that are new to FPV and you're reading down in the comments, most of those people out down there, they have something else that's a lot more expensive and fancier and a lot more feature rich, which of course subjectively they like, and then so they see something kind of like this that looks kind of like a toy, and whether or not they've tried it or not, they're just not going to like it. That's kind of to be expected. Now, if your goal is to eventually outgrow this particular style of controller and you want like a lot of switches and features and that kind of stuff, and you already know that that's what you're going to be doing down the road, and you don't want to start off with this, you don't want to invest the money into this controller, there is another route you can go. So they have, Orca has created this thing called the FPV JR BT module, and I have it here installed in my Jumper T15. It just goes into the module bay. That's the standard JR module bay that's in a lot of OpenTX, EdgeTX radios. And all you got to do is, when you set up your model in the radio, you just set up the external module bay, of course, and then you set it to the Ghost protocol. And then basically that will mimic the Bluetooth functionality of this Orca controller in your traditional sort of hobby grade radios. So if you do want to eventually go down the road of being in the Orca ecosystem, but you don't want to necessarily buy this controller, your option is to, find a nice radio that you know you'll like. Maybe you got some recommendations from some friends, and one that you definitely will grow into. It will just need to have the standard JR module bay. So you don't want to get one of those with a nano bay, like a Pocket, for example, Radio Master Pocket. So things like the Boxer, obviously the T14, the T15, all of them have the standard module bay. I think also things like the Taranis and the older radios. This is a pretty common size, but it's got to be the standard JR module bay. And this will just go in here and just basically goes into the back. You just plug it in, and then once you have this set up, it'll just basically look like a Bluetooth device, and then you can connect it to the mobile app, to your PC via Bluetooth, and it'll just show up as a joystick. And that's how you can get into your simulators, instead of going down the route with their particular controller. You can use a more traditional hobby grade controller with this module adapter. So if you already know you're going to go to a radio like this and you don't want to use this, then that's what you would do. And then you can then at that point take that as your step one, connect to their simulator, use that to get started, and then you can go to the next step from there. Obviously, you won't get the Uberlight module for your next step. If you have a traditional radio, you're going to get the full Ghost module that goes into the micro, JR module bay here for that. So it's a little bit different. So something to be aware of if you are, sort of looking ahead. That's one thing you want to be aware of. You don't want to get the Uber module that's recommended in step 2. That's going to be for this controller only. Now, in terms of my thoughts on the controller itself, this is not a review. This controller has been reviewed many times by lots of other channels already. It's been out for a couple of years, I think, already. So, in terms of the ergonomics, I have no complaints about it. It's got basically the same switches here and buttons. Pretty basic, right? I have no real complaints about it. It's fine. Ergonomically, I feel like it's comfortable. It's a good weight, not too heavy, not too light. The only thing I don't like are these gimbals. They're plastic. They're very plasticky, and they just have, I think it's a cost issue at this point for Orca in terms of manufacturing. The gimbals, they work. I can fly with them. I flew the Dream X with it, no problem. I just don't like the way they feel because I've flown with radios that have much better gimbals. Obviously, they're much more expensive, but once it's kind of like if you're in like never flown or seen any kind of gimbals before or felt any gimbals before, you probably will like not even care or even know the difference. But then once you've flown for a while and you've flown with some nicer gimbals, like for the ones on the T15, these are pretty nice. You realize, what you've been missing out on. So, I don't want to scare you if you are going to invest in this radio. Functionally, it's 100% acceptable. You can fly whatever you want with this. It's very subjective in terms of how they feel. It's just a feeling type of thing. In terms of functionality, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just, it's kind of like a, cosmetic, you're looking at a car and like, things that are cosmetically look nicer. Of course, you feel like, well, it's hard to go back to something that doesn't look as nice. So that's kind of, because I've been flying for 10 years and I know what nice gimbals feel like. And so moving down to these, not so nice. But if I were starting out for the first time, I probably wouldn't know the difference. And most people probably wouldn't notice the difference either. It will work. But if you're really concerned about that, again, you can go the route of the Orca module in the back here. Start off with a nice radio like this, and then of course you're going to be using the Ghost stuff. You can move up to the Dream X, etc. You'll be in the Orca ecosystem, so if that's something that you want, then by all means that's another option you can go with. So that'll cover for my video here on this controller. Hopefully it covered a lot of questions from the previous video on this and their ecosystem, some of the other questions. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I'll have a video on the goggles versus the SkyZone goggles, and then another video on the Dream X, doing a digital conversion on that. So if you have any questions about that as well, do leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll try and address those in those next couple of videos. All right, that'll do it for this one. Talk to you guys in the next video.